For a long time now, Chrome OS and Android have been two totally separate things. But over the past year or so, we've been hearing rumblings that Google is going to merge them or combine them or make them the same or something along those lines. And it's been interesting, but today we actually saw some bigger developments in this space. And I thought I should wrap this all up so that everyone knows exactly how this all came to be, what's going on, what we can expect from it in the future, and what readers of Android Authority and other people like you think about it. So this is a pretty big deal because, you know, it's not every day that you see two totally different operating systems merged together into one. But it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to think that that Chrome OS, you know, is specifically designed for laptops, and then Android is designed for tablets and phones. But they're based on a lot of the same principles. They have a lot of overlap, and it does make it kind of silly that there are two separate things. So anyway, let me start at the beginning here and talk about like how this all came about. So if you look over here on this Chromium blog from June 12th, 2024, last year, we got a statement from Google saying that a very interesting thing at the time, which is we'll be embracing portions of the Android stack, like the Android Linux kernel and Android frameworks as part of the foundation of Chrome OS. So at the time, this was exciting because it sort of represented that Google had big hopes for making Chrome OS more like Android. And if you'll remember, previously, Google made Chrome OS more like Android by actually offering Android apps. So long before this blog post came about, Google brought over the ability to have the Google Play Store within Chrome, which made it so that you could pretty much use any Android app that you've already enjoyed on your phone or your tablet on your Chromebook, which is really cool and was something that made Chrome so much more useful than it had been in the past. But what Google is talking about here is like the underlying development of Chrome OS is actually going to become more like Android. So this was in June last year. And then in November, Android Authority, we broke a story about how Google is going to turn Chrome OS into Android to compete with the iPad. So this was much more specific. This was the idea that Google was going to take the two operating systems, smash them together, and the actual purpose was to compete with Apple and the iPad. Now, I don't need to go into this too much because obviously most people watching this are not Apple fans, but I will say that Apple has done a terrific job of making its ecosystem work so well together. If you have an iPhone and an iPad, they work well together. You know, they're not based on the same operating system, but they work together really, really well. And same thing with your Apple TV 4K and your MacBook and all these other things that are based on different operating systems but play well nicely together. And Chrome OS and Android obviously do that, but tablets are the missing link there. Android tablets obviously play well with Android phones, but I don't know, the Android tablet market just isn't as robust as the iPad is. And so Google is seeing that. And according to this leak that we had from an internal source within Google, the purpose of this merge of Chrome OS and Android is to attack the tablet market. So there's a bunch of interesting stuff in here, and I'll leave a link down in the description so you can read about it. Michal obviously has an amazing way of explaining everything, and there's a lot of cool stuff in here about how Android Linux kernel and Chrome OS's Linux kernel need to be, you know, compatible and all these other things. So highly recommend checking this out. But the basic gist is that in November last year, we had a leak. Chrome OS and Android are merging together. At the same time, our friends over at Android Headlines also had a break in a leak saying that Google is developing a Pixel laptop. And this sort of worked well with the leak that we had on the exact same day, which is that Google is developing Chrome OS to be, you know, more like Android, or possibly merging it with Android completely and going to create a new Pixel branded laptop for it. And according to the source within, or the source speaking with Android Headlines, the laptop's code name is Snowy. So the fact that there's a code name and the fact that we independently had a leak about Chrome OS and Android merging together leads me to believe that this is probably true. Don't pay any attention to this. This is a thing. This is not what the Pixel laptop looks like. Nobody knows what the Pixel laptop looks like. We just know the code name, it's Snowy. So this is all happening in November last year. Very exciting. So now, fast forward to last week, we have an interview here with Samir Samat over at Tech Radar. And Samir, during this interview, asked the interviewer about why they're using Apple products. So apparently the interviewer who was talking with Samir had an iPhone and a MacBook and all sorts of Apple products, and Samir asked about that. And just as a refresher here, just so you know, this is Samir's LinkedIn page. Samir is the president of the Android ecosystem at Google. So this is not like some low-level engineer. This is the top brass at Android. So he's talking with Tech Radar here, and this is the interesting quote here. So this is Samir. I asked about the laptop. I asked because we're going to be combining Chrome OS and Android into a single platform, and I am very interested in how people are using their laptops these days and what they're getting done. So on its own, this quote is interesting, but when you combine it with all the stuff that I've already talked about, this is really interesting now. So this is Samir actually admitting publicly during the interview that he knows is going to be published and on the record, saying that we're going to be combining Chrome OS and Android into a single platform. So the question then becomes, what does that mean? Does that mean that Android and Chrome OS are going to go away and there's going to be a new platform? We think that what Samir means here is that it's going to be Android. Android is well understood around the world as being a mobile operating system. It's got tons and tons of mind share. People understand what Android is much more than they understand what Chrome OS is. It wouldn't make any sense to try and make a brand new operating system combining the two together. It would make way more sense from a marketing standpoint to just use Android. So I would take what he's saying here with a tiny grain of salt, that when he says Chrome OS and Android into a single platform. I think what he really means is we're going to get rid of Chrome OS and we're going to make Android the top thing. So this is all really, really interesting, but it does present some complications. For example, what about education? So when it comes to selling Chrome OS, your Chromebooks, Chrome OS based machines, predominantly the people that are buying them are actually not people, they're corporations and organizations based in the education space. So if you go to a public high school or wherever, you're going to see a lot of Chromebooks. And the reason for that is because they're cheap, they're easy to maintain, they're relatively virus free, and it's hard to mess them up. So people in the education space love Chromebooks and they love Chrome OS. So the big complication here is, how does Google thread the needle here by keeping those customers happy with whatever it is that they're making when they merge Chrome OS and Android together, while also making it enticing for people like you and me, the general consumer, the person who is actually going to buy, like go to a store and buy a Chromebook. Instead of the education space, which just buys thousands of the books and distributes them to students and faculty. That's the big question. How is Google going to do that? And so we asked you about this when this news broke back in November, and it was pretty interesting that. So if you look at this chart here, nearly 50% of the people who responded said that they were optimistic for this move. They're optimistic about the idea of Chrome OS and Android merging together. And then a sizable amount of you, 25%, said that they are excited about it, but they don't trust Google to pull it off. And then the remaining 25% said that they don't think it's the right move. But I want to focus right now on this 25%. The people who are excited about the concept of Chrome OS and Android merging together, but don't think that Google can pull it off. So this is a very valid concern, because Google does have a history of messing this kind of thing up. Google has a long history of trying out stuff, seeing it fail, and then just immediately abandoning it and moving on. And merging two operating systems with such wide-ranging user bases into one is a lot. That's a lot for anybody, and especially for a company like Google that has a bad history with that. So this chart is fairly interesting, and keep that in mind. So then I wanted to wrap this up here by pointing out a choice comment here from a reader at Android Authority on the news that we wrote today about Samir's interview and the quote from him about combining the two operating systems. So this is really cool. This comes from this user here, Rhett Livingston, and he writes, at its most basic level, this is just a merger of two Linux distributions. It makes all sorts of sense. It's possible that the need for their separation was the limitations of phone hardware. Phones had to do more with less, so they had to do a lot more specialization. So what Rhett is saying here is that when Android and Chrome OS both came around, phones were very different. I mean, phones have come a long way in the past decade, and the power that you could fit into a laptop and the power you could fit into a phone were crazy different. Now, in 2025, that's not necessarily the case. You could buy a Galaxy S25 Ultra and you could buy a, $500 to $700 laptop, and the power between them is going to be pretty comparable. I mean, obviously there might be some advantages and disadvantages for each one, but really when it comes to just raw performance, they're both going to be probably pretty equal. So times have changed, and Rhett, I strongly recommend reading the rest of his comment here, but Rhett's basically making an argument that this is something that's long overdue, and Chrome OS should be merged with Android. And then there are some other comments in here about people saying that this is not a good idea, or this is going to be too messy, or I don't understand why Google's doing this, or whatever. Once again, highly recommend going down here and reading more about that. But the overall thing here is that Chrome OS and Android are going to merge. Like Samir is talking about it, we've seen multiple leaks about it. Android Headlines had a leak about a laptop that Google is developing with this merged operating system. This is happening. And we just have to, sit around and wait until Google is ready to announce it. So the big question then becomes, when is this going to happen? Well, considering that we've been hearing about it for over a year now, and we still don't have any kind of confirmation, my guess would be at the earliest 2026. I don't think it's something that's going to happen this year. We're a little too late in the year, and we have and it's still too speculative. But yeah, coming soon, I would say, maybe in the next year, 2 years. So get excited for that. I personally am excited. I think that having a laptop that runs straight Android, not Chrome OS, but Android, would be a compelling thing for somebody like me, especially because I'm a Windows guy, only use Windows and Android. So having Android across everything that I own, as far as my travel tech goes, would be pretty cool. But let me know what you think. Jump down in the comments and shout out about what you think about Chrome OS and Android merging, and stick around because we're probably going to have more news about this very soon. So see you guys later.